Ladies and gentlemen, boy, do I have a show for you. If you are looking to get the most intelligence out of these new reasoning models, then this show is for you. So that means if you're using ChatGPT's O1 models for reasoning, or if you're using the new DeepSeek R1 models, I have some secret sauce. And not only do I have some secret sauce, I have a staff researcher from Unity, and his name is Eric Provencher. Welcome to the show. Eric, how's it going?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ray. I'm doing great. Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to
Thanks for
see
round
you.
two.
Yeah, so this is round two, and what we're going to cover today are some of like the techniques that Eric is using to get the most out of his code, so that he can actually make some great changes with these types of models. And there's so much to leverage, and there's so many different ways that we can do these types of things that it's just really hard to manually copy and paste bits and sections from your code. So Eric has actually invented a new app, and it's called Repo Prompt. And the Repo Prompt will basically allow you to grab the code and put it into these models a lot easier than going back and forth between these chat apps. And so without further ado, I'd love to have you talk more about this, Eric.
Yeah, so back, around 6 months ago, a little over that now, I was working on a game project for myself, and I was getting a little frustrated trying to, get my code context into Claude at the time. That was back when Claude Opus was a big thing. And oh my goodness, I having some little technical audio issues. Just give me a quick moment here.
Okay. Yeah, I could hear you fine. It's probably
Okay.
some other issues on stuff dropping out.
Okay, no, I think we're good now. So
Okay.
sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes, so as I was saying, so I was running into some issues trying to get my context moved over, and what ended up happening is like I started working on this app, Repo Prompt at the time, and it was just accelerating my workflow so much that I just kept building it and started sharing with people, and they kept giving me some positive feedback. So I'm still working on it. It's been going on for a while now. And yeah, I think as I've been building it, I've just learned a lot more about prompting as well, like trying to get the most out of my time working with it. Because some of you may know I'm a father, a new father, and my time to code is a little limited. I also do have a job, and so I really want to be efficient with my time. And so I built this app, and now with the new reasoning models, like a lot of what I've been building really translates super well to it, and especially because you have some of these models like O1 Pro, where you can only use them in the ChatGPT app. And that comes with some complications on like, okay, well, how do I actually be efficient with that? Because, a chat app is not the most efficient way of coding. And yes, with ChatGPT, you can reference a specific file, but like code projects are complex. There's a lot of context, and applying edits is also a big thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Repo Prompt's designed to help a lot with a lot of that.
That's pretty cool. And yeah, I'd love to take a look with you right now and kind of get some understanding as we go. Because when we start asking the models questions, as you know, it's going to take some time to think. And that'll be kind of a good time for us to really talk about what Eric is doing. So maybe he can just kind of show us and then kind of walk us through some of those techniques. So, like, what's going to be really important for grabbing context, or how do we get these instructions? Because these are also kind of limited as far as like context windows and things as well. So that'll be some really interesting things there. So tell us what we're looking at currently there.
So I've got RepoPrompt open right now, and on X there's a lot of chatter around this ball demo. So I built a little one using 3JS and Vue. So this was actually coded up by O1 Pro as well. So this is the project for that. So there's a lot of setup. Web projects have a lot of setup files, but the real script is just this one script over here. So when you're iterating on a project like this, I can either give the whole context or just focus on a specific file. And you can see everything here. We can even sort by token usage here. Now it's a new feature. So if you want to remove a lot of junk from the project, like remove the most of the tokens that you don't need, okay, great. We've just cleared up a bunch of stuff that is unnecessary, just like that. And yeah, so when you're prompting with any LLM, really, you want to be really cautious about like how much context you're giving. There's a lot of tools out there that will just zip up whole repos and just dump it out there, and that works, but you end up distracting the LLM with spurious context that just isn't helpful. So the more I use it, the more I realize that like you really want to be very selective about what you're sharing with the model, and just have it focused very closely on a given task. So for optimal use, like we can just give it like, here's our package. So like the package will tell us like, okay, this is like the context of like what libs we're using, and you can give it like a specific file you're working on, and like that's enough to like go really far with like a lot of stuff. Just as an example. So let's dive into a little bit of like what we can do here. So there's the spinning cube. So let's try and add a second ball here. Let's add a second ball bouncing around in this cube here. And so as I read a prompt like that, like that's just like a really simple task. And there's some different ways to go about like, okay, well, what do I do with this command? So if you want to really like take your time with like a response, you can just either you can just go straight ahead and do this, or you can say, okay, like let's expand the implications of this prompt, rewrite the prompt for me to be more effective at capturing all of the edge cases. Okay, so that's like just like a little extra command. So when you're writing a prompt for O1, generally you have like your main command, and then you kind of have like a separate like little bit of formatting. So that's like a good way to think about it. Repo prompt, we also have different role prompts that we can store, so we can have some stored prompts. I'll get into these in a little bit. We don't have to go into them right now, just because it's like a simple thing. So right now we're just rewriting this prompt. We got the script, and yeah, and I'll just include the package. I'll just say included is my package JSON showing you how the project is structured. Great. So we've got that going. Let's open up O1. We don't always have to use O1 Pro. O1 standard is much faster, and especially if you're just rewriting a prompt, you don't want to spend too much time waiting for something that's like not that complex. So like I think like a really big thing when you're working with these reasoners is that you really have to manage like, okay, first of all, like if you're using ChatGPT like not Pro, like you have limited uses of O1, so you have to be cautious about what you're actually asking of O1. DeepSeek R1, it's much cheaper, so you can kind of be more casual about it. O1 Pro users, you're gonna have like unlimited use, but then time is still of an important thing. So see, like O1 right now, it like thought through like, okay, well, what is everything? So it's like here's the setup. Like it read through my whole like package. It knows exactly what kind of context we're building. Okay, so now it's like, okay, thinking about like all the edge cases, performance, reusable functions. Okay, great. So this is a much better prompt. So let's just like copy this over here. Often what I'm going to be doing with Repo Prompt, and this is something I'm like kind of iterating on. I've got this workspaces feature coming that will help like bounce between tasks a lot more easily. But you kind of just go back and forth. So you're like iterating on prompts with the same context. So I don't have to copy paste my files again. The same files are there. I've given it context. I don't need the JS anymore. Now I'm going to have an architect prompt run. And what I often do with O1 Pro is I run experiments. So I can run off an experiment with O1 to see what would O1 do, and we'll see where that ends up. And
the
then,
one that's selected.
Then I tried again with
engineer.
O1 Pro.
Yeah.
It's using the engineer prompt.
Yeah.
And the engineer prompt that I've got set up here. Sorry, Ray. Before I go further, you wanted to jump in for a sec. Yeah.
Oh no, it's just it's showing engineer. I think you said
yeah.
Architect. Yeah.
I did say architect. You're right. So we'll do it with architect. Yeah, and we got architect running there. So what are these different role prompts and why do I have them? So we can open them up and we can take a look at them. So like let's click the edit button. So the architect prompt is just a prompt that's built in. It's nothing crazy, but it's just designed to help the AI think through what it is that you're trying to solve without actually writing all the code itself. And that gives the model much more space to think for a while on the actual problem rather than the solution. And there's a difference between the two because like your code solution, like you can implement the solution in many different ways, right? And if you're asking the AI to go ahead and do something, sometimes it'll rewrite all your files. Sometimes it'll go ahead and like add some stuff that you didn't want, or it'll remove functionality that you didn't want to have removed. So when you're thinking through the architect, you're like, okay, like here's the spec, here's what I need to do, and you go through. And what that really allows you to do is just get a much more detailed solution. And then the engineer prompt, it's set up separately to focus on the actual like code changes. So if you're not using a separate tool and you just want to copy paste the code blocks in, this is very helpful as well. But even if you're trying to like use cursor or use like use repo prompts like built-in chat functionality, you can use this as like a baseline to say, okay, this is the file I want to edit, this is the code change I want to do, and whatnot. And It's also designed to be minimal changes. So you want to have the AI really focus on what actually needs editing. So when you've got lots of files, like that's a really specific like important thing. So this is just one file, so it's not like as important. Um, but yeah, like that's just like important stuff. So the more complex the task, the more granular you want to be about it. Yeah. So I was just thinking here. Let's just go look a little bit. One of them did finish. So this one just went ahead and redid it. So this was O1 not pro. So like it's probably done a decent job as well. So let's just see what happens here if I save that. Okay, we got two balls bouncing. So O1 not pro was able to do it no problem. But now you can see the balls are actually not they're not colliding with each other, which is actually interesting. So we'll see what O1 Pro does as well as a result. Maybe it thinks about these problems, maybe not. But like just the power of having the AI first about what in your prompt and one about like the requirements, like those are just really key things to go through. So Ray, have you experimented a little bit with trying some of these engineer and architect prompts on your end?
Yeah, I mostly use the architect prompt a lot to
Mhm,
refactor and like connect the databases and stuff. And so I do
mhm,
find it extremely helpful for it to kind of walk through the code and have it take a look at like all the different files that I have and it kind of give me some, insights as far as like, hey, like, where are my data connections? And then sometimes I actually take a little bit further and act as a QA engineer myself. And then I
mhm,
just say, okay, I'm using the architect prompt, right? So I just tell it like, hey, I'm concerned about security. And then I'm also kind of curious about if you can just kind of take a look at my routes. I want to make sure that they're protected. And I also want to make sure I don't expose any of my endpoints or any of like the database stuff to the front end client side. So can you just kind of make sure that you can go through that as well in any detail? So it's actually using the architect route to kind of, scrape through the files and do whatever it does. And it seems to be pretty thorough as far as thinking through. And then for that part of the plan, I just kind of like to throw it into a composer or something and just see how it actually takes advantage of this, because it has all these references to all these functions and stuff that I've made to make the app. So I'm just going to double check the audio real quick. So yeah, you can just keep talking, and I'm going to just make sure because somebody reported that there was some echo, and I think it may be on my side, but we'll see. So.
Okay. Okay. Um, so yeah, as you were saying, when you're diving into like complex dependencies, the architect prompt really helps do a lot of that work for you. O1 Pro is a model that like really benefits from detailed plans. Like the more detailed your prompt, the better it's able to get to work. But you also want to make sure that you're adding non-spurious detail. You want to make sure that like you're really focusing on what it is that you're trying to do. And one interesting thing as we just won't all these O1 Pro threads finished off is so the O1 model didn't manage to integrate the sphere on sphere collision, but the O1 Pro one did do it properly, which is quite interesting actually. So we've got a spinning ball, two spinning balls that hit each other. It seems like one of them goes a little bit out of the cube sometimes, but it comes right back in. Maybe it's
Whoa.
just a game of perspective.
Huh.
Um, yeah. So this is a fun little demo toy here.
Yeah,
Um,
interesting about Martin's question here is like how much better do you perceive O1 Pro versus O1 in most instances? Huh.
yeah, it's funny. So a lot of the times they answer very similar kinds of responses. But what you'll find occasionally is that like O1 Pro will think through that like one extra detail that makes like a difference in like the execution on like something production ready. So like you'll say, okay, like O1 will solve the problem. And then O1 Pro will be like, oh, but don't forget to also update this other function that like adds this extra bit of thing that solves that problem. And I find O1 Pro is just much more detailed with its plans, though O1 is also very good at it. It's just a matter of like those like extra details. Like I find just having it think that much longer, and I don't know what sauce they're doing in terms of like parallel threads or whatever going
Mm.
on. It just adds like an extra bit of like reliability. As we saw, like when I implemented the O1 solution, the two balls didn't bounce despite it trying to solve that problem. But when I did the O1 Pro solution, it did do it properly. So that's kind of like an interesting little caveat where it's like it managed to get the two balls running, but there was that one thing missing. Um,
Wow.
so like
Huh.
yeah, but in all cases when you're working with these reasoners, like you really do want to like take a second to like flesh out your prompt. And you don't have to use O1 to refine your prompt. You can use like Claude Sonnet or whatever to just rewrite your prompt. But like giving the models like the context of your files, like what it is that you're trying to do, and having it rewrite your prompt, like that's just so important, because like otherwise like humans are not able to think through all the details. Like they're like when you give the model specifically the time to think through, okay, well, what is it that I'm asking? And that's like kind of meta prompting right there, where you're like having it really go through those extra details. It just makes all the difference.
I see. And then let me just zoom in on the app here on my software. And it actually, what I kind of want to call out are some of like the tokens that are presented at the very bottom and also on the side, so that people have some awareness that like the
Hmm.
actual, app is actually showing us at the bottom says approximate token count. So you can tell how many tokens you're going to use, whether it's 5,025, and then which files are actually using up the most tokens, or which folders and stuff as well. So that could be really
Yeah, and
helpful, right?
I recently added sorting by tokens here for this view as well, so you can easily like remove files that just go in groups by tokens that aren't useful. So just cleaned up a lot of
Oh,
our usage like that. So, and you can delete folders all at once, or you can resort by name, so like this stays more consistent as I'm like toggling things.
yeah. So,
Um,
so let's just talk about like one quick strategy. You had mentioned
mhm,
this a little bit earlier, and I think I want people to kind of come back to this section, and that would be just about like how do you know which files to group together, and then how do
mhm.
you just kind of architect your prompting so that you can achieve these outcomes? Because sometimes, I'm very ambitious and I want to have it do everything because it's my AI and I just want
Mhm.
to go to the beach. Honestly. But
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of us are either frustrated because we give it too much instructions and we
Yeah.
don't really know what's going to happen on the other end, or we may not give it enough instructions or context. So we just love to know what your thoughts are, or what you've seen with your research.
So, what I've noticed a lot is really the least amount of context, the better. The only thing is that like that does require you to have some domain knowledge of what it is you're working on. Because if you're just like, you're not a coder and you're using these AI tools and you're trying to run with it and see how far you can get, like that, it becomes a little bit trickier. And I do encourage you, if you're in that camp, to like try and understand like what are your files doing, like what is this file responsible for, how does it relate to your other files. And that's a lot of coding tools will have ways of like figuring out which files relate to each other, and that's something that I want to do a little bit better of a job in Repo Prompt in the next few months, as I improve the app. Like just being able to like automatically detect, like, okay, so you're working with this file, like this file is aware of these three other files. Do you want to include them as well? Like that kind of thing. Like that's something that's not yet supported, but something that is quite helpful to do. So you can look up these files here. So we allow you to like kind of preview files in the app, and I can see. So in this case, like it's just the one file, so it's not going to be that helpful for me to kind of demo like what else I should do. But really, like I said, the least you can put in, the better. And but you want to have just enough so that like it doesn't start thinking about files that are outside of what you gave it and start trying to edit those files, because that's when it starts to hallucinate more, and it's where you want to kind of avoid that area. But oftentimes, if you give it just enough, like it's able to kind of think through those files that you've given it and kind of come up with a solution and infer like what these different classes or structs can do, like what kind of API surfaces is accessible, and you can kind of work with that. Um, but on that note, let's like dive in a little bit more on like what it is that like we want to do with a prompt and like how this is structured. And I can kind of open this up. So if I were to like take this, like I'm actually going to remove a lot of this context just because like it's a lot there, and I'll make it easier to kind of scroll through. So if I take a prompt like this, I've got no extra instructions. I can hit copy here, and I can open up I open up VS Code, so we can kind of take a look at. Yeah, we can take a look at here. So what it is that I pasted here. So as you can see, Repo Prompt will wrap your file in XML. So you have the file context and the path is written there. We actually support also, like, you can go in the settings and you can switch the relative path. Some people have asked like they don't want to show the full path to like AI models, so we can go like that, and you can see just the relative path is shown. So if you want to have some privacy consideration, that's valuable too. Um, and then what do we have here? So we've got like the user instructions that are down below, and that's kind of it. So one thing that has come a lot from this come up a lot with users in the Discord as I've experimented, like they've kind of helped me like optimize, through a lot of like trial and error. Um, that like putting the instructions at the bottom is generally for most models like a good way to go. You put the context of your context dump at the top, and your clean instructions at the bottom. From my own experience, like the stuff that you have at the bottom, you really like it's good to have like summaries, recaps, that kind of thing at the bottom to kind of, refresh the model. Like, okay, it's read all these instructions. What are like the key things that you really don't want it to forget? Like that's kind of stuff you want to put at the bottom. So like having just this structure of like putting one after the other helps a lot. So we can get a little bit richer here. So let's add the architect prompt and see what that looks like instead. So I can paste that in. So as you got the user instructions, you got the meta prompt one. So it kind of says like, okay, well, what is the prompt and like, what does it tell it to do? And that's before the user instructions, because you want it to be like a qualifier to your instructions. Like you don't want it to kind of overlap. So you want it to put it before and make sure that that's clear. And we can also add the file tree here. So if you want the AI to be aware of everything in your repo, we can add the file tree. And then you can see that's up front here. So there's the whole repo. And that's considering like everything I've ignored with git ignore. So if you're not familiar with git ignore, it's like a way to filter out files. And RepoPrompt also has like some built-in ignores, and we could add our own repo ignore. So being able to filter out what you don't want, that's super important when you're working with models. Like it's a good trick there. And we could also do some searching here. So if I look for app, like we'll find like these files here. So if you want to select just those, very helpful. Yeah, and then another thing that we can do with RepoPrompt that helps a lot with some of the other side of this. So say I was like working on this response. So if I open up O1, so here was this plan. So I can show you like what we can do with this. So if I open a new chat here, it's got this thing we can paste in the plan, and then we can have DeepSeek go ahead and implement the code based on all the changes we asked. So it's like, okay, it's refactoring, it's thinking about these things. In this case, like the code was already like implemented in this way, so it's just going to go ahead and kind of re-implement some of the same stuff. But like another way to go about it is to go into this apply tab. We can hit copy XML prompt and then go into O1. And what that's going to do, same as the chat, is that it's going to go ahead and basically create formatting instructions to help rewrite this file. No edits needed. So while DeepSeek went off and just kind of said, hey, actually, like here's the file again, O1 was like, no, actually, like everything's already implemented. I don't need to do anything, which is kind of interesting to think about. So that's like one of the powered reasoning models. I'm not sure if what would happen if I tried again with the reasoner. So we can just try again with DeepSeek reasoner. It's probably going to think for a while, and maybe it'll do something, maybe not. Like I find DeepSeek, it kind of really ramps for a while. You have to just really be patient with it. O1, I think they did a good job of like not O1 Pro, but O1 normal, where like if the changes are small, it'll really think through and just kind of answer quickly, which is really nice.
So let's just kind of rewind that back for a little bit, because it may have been a little too fast even for me.
Sure.
And so what the goal of what you were doing is we went back to your code base. You selected the files for RepoPrompt, right? Like the specific files you need. And then you gave it the goal and the key requirements based off of some other meta prompting or other prompting that you were doing earlier from the conversations, right? Okay, so now that you're ready to go, some of the options you have to go from are you can either basically go to ChatGPT Pro, like either through the app, or if you stay within RepoPrompt, you can actually go to the chat section. So that will basically use your API keys. In order to configure those, there's like a little gear up there, and that will let you select a couple of things. So you can go Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini, OpenRouter, all of the different models on OpenRouter, including DeepSeek R1 model. And then you could even have local models, right? So like if you wanted to
have local models and fully custom providers. So like I didn't actually implement DeepSeek into RepoPrompt, but I have a custom provider. So I just point to the URL of where the DeepSeek API is, and then I give it the key, and it's able to find the models that endpoint supports, and I'm able to add them to the app.
That's nice. And so in the chat mode, similar to ChatGPT, you stay within RepoPrompt, and you're either using whatever model you selected, whether it's a local one or whether it's one that you're going out to the internet to go get, or even OpenAI's own model, because you give it your API key. And then it's basically using all that context to do what you would normally do. So that way you don't necessarily have to leave the app as an option. And as you see, the code just generated for us right there. And it looks like you have the option to actually merge the changes right in, which is actually really nice. So you can review the code and select the different files. And so either reject them or accept them all and so forth. And so for folks who are following along that just kind of got tuned in, if you're actually have a Mac, RepoPrompt currently runs on that platform. RepoPrompt.com has a wait list for those who are on the Windows or Linux platforms, so they can just go ahead and go sign up. So if you want to play around today, if you have a Mac, this is kind of the platform that he uses. But what Eric was showing us earlier, if you're just tuning in or kind of got to this section right now, was the fact that a little bit of a breakdown of what these prompts actually look like when you copy them out. And it's basically all of the metadata kind of organized in the tags in the way that these language models really respond to very well. They're like extremely good at following these tags in the way that Eric has organized them, and has been iterating with this over and over. And some of the things that kind of have blown me away have been like including a file tree, so that it knows about the file structure and where to put the files when it does generate them for you. In the file contents are all the pieces of your code. And then right before all of your final instructions are kind of that meta prompts, which is like, are you an architect? Any other instructions you want to have before then it goes through. And so for a reasoning model, this is all really rich detail that they need so that they can like actually put that into their context and execute and so forth. So yeah, that's just kind of a heads up of what we have. And then so we have, Repo Prompt to chat. Repo Prompt can go out to like an OpenAI app or even Claude Sonnet or whatever other chat app and stuff. And then you also have
chat app you want.
Yeah, the apply one. So the apply one, is that kind of what's this guy?
So apply, basically the way that this works is that, so in the main view here, there's these two things. So we clicked on file tree earlier. I didn't click on XML diff. We can click diff or whole. So basically, when you're working with ChatGPT, let's say you want to like work on some code, you have a plan, you want to know exactly like what you're going to do. Ideally, you have the engineer output, so you have the engineer kind of break down changes for you. In this case, a lot of the time, as in our demos, like it's just kind of like rewriting the whole class because it's one class and that's easy for it to do. But if you're in a big existing code base, like there's going to be a lot of files to touch. So you really want to like have the AI model not rewrite everything because it's going to probably make mistakes. Or I'm sure you've seen this when you ask it to do the whole class and it's a huge class. It'll be like, oh, like abbreviated or like kept a placeholder for brevity. Like it'll be like your existing code here, that kind of stuff. Like it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so there's like so that's like, if you use the whole, it's gonna force the AI to be like, hey, like write everything. It can make mistakes. Sometimes the AI doesn't listen to your instructions and will do what it wants. But if you've used other apps like Aider, which is like the only one I think that does this really well, you can have the AI kind of just spit out like changes. And actually, this is what happened here. So it like just output the diffs. Like, so there's two changes here. So it rewrote this chunk of code and then it rewrote this chunk of code and didn't do the whole file because it felt like doing that instead. So when you're working in large files, like, and you want to say like, hey, like replace this code and replace this code or this code, you have like 8 changes in a file. It can be really, really fast to go and just piecemeal search, replace all those pieces. So if you do XML diff, you enable that on, that's going to get pasted in. And that's like a big prompt here. We can look at that too. So that's like included here. So this is like a really big prompt. And it puts this kind of before your user instructions. And there's like a lot of final notes here. It's giving some examples on how to structure it well, like what kind of tools. So basically, if you've used like LLMs with tool use, what I've kind of done here is I've created a format in XML where I give some tools to the LLM, and you're able to kind of get tool use with like ChatGPT without having to use the API, which is kind of cool.
Bro, this is mind blowing. This is absolutely like. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why I had to pause here, because like, let's just kind of think about this for a second. Like, the boy is cooking. Eric Provencher, who are those who are just following as a staff researcher at Unity, and has made this app Repo Prompt because he's a father and he's got obligations and he's got an actual normal job and it's more demanding than 40 hours a week. You can imagine, right? And then not on top of that, he still wants to write code and do things as his hobby. And playing around with these AI models, you have such a small window if you're this busy to then try to leverage everything on your own time. And so this is really trying to speed up that workflow. And you can kind of start to see how this can really compound, not only for you to save your time if you're working on your projects, but to really truly understand. And I think one of the things I really appreciate about what you're doing with Repo Prompt is that you're actually letting me copy it and show me the prompt of what's happening. So you're kind of showing me underneath the blanket, if I really want to, to start to
Yeah.
learn for myself and then apply those
Yeah.
techniques or tweak and try different things. So I definitely appreciate
Absolutely.
that. And I think that's just really cool. And if you haven't had a chance, just go check out repoprompt.com. It's a Mac only app right now, but there's a wait list for those on Windows and Linux. So you can just go ahead and sign up. This is not sponsored, by the way. This is not a like advertisement. I love finding stuff like this that's super useful and people who are super useful in the community. And Eric came across my radar a while back, and we thought, hey, this could be an interesting cursor alternative for those who are trying out stuff with cursor and coding. And I think that's kind of where the breakthrough of prompting really started to shine, and then even more so with these reasoning models. Have you had any experience using this with like R1 or DeepSeek and stuff like the
A
thinking and
little.
what is?
Yeah. So I haven't had that, like DeepSeek R1 just came out like last week, so I haven't had a ton of time to play with it. I wanted to make sure it's well supported in Repo Prompt, so if folks want to use it, they can. But I've got a ChatGPT Pro subscription, and I'd rather just be using that because I trust it more. And from what I've seen, like it's just a smarter model.
Hmm.
But I've been using DeepSeek the non-reasoner one for like some file editing work, because it's a lot cheaper than Sonnet. Um, because so when you're working with DeepSeek Chat, like it's just basically just a really good file editor. So I was talking a little bit about this like search replace workflow in the XML, and DeepSeek Chat is one of the few models that does a good job of actually targeting the right bits of code to change and swap out. So when you're working with O1 Pro, I can say like, hey, get this work done, and then take take the response, put that into DeepSeek, and then have it just implement the changes for you like this, as you can see, like where it creates the diffs and then you can approve them. But then, yeah, like I was saying, there's the other way is going ahead and writing some instructions here, having the XML prompt included, or checking this box here, and then just having ChatGPT write the diff for you. So like if I look through here, I can see I did some tests earlier. Yeah, here's like a big XML that I was running through earlier. Um, and so what's it doing? So we could walk through a little bit of like what this looks like. And if you look through the chat app, like this is kind of like I parse all of this and present it in a nicer way so that you don't have to look at this XML. But if you want to
Mm.
kind of save on your tokens and you want to use ChatGPT because you're already paying for that, like it's totally viable. You can just hit copy and like paste that in, and then it just gets parsed, and then you can see like all the changes that need to be done.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I see. I see. That's how you would use it.
yeah,
So when you
yeah,
go
and
to
you can like,
compose,
change it.
in
Yeah.
compose is where you actually set up the XML diff. Is that what you're saying there? As far as like that little
So in
tag?
compose
Yeah.
is your main prompt,
Hmm.
and it's some folks find it a little confusing, and I'm still to be reworked. Like I'm kind of iterating still on the layout for everything. But like basically, if I hit this and I copy my prompt as I was showing you earlier, it'll come with the big XML formatting prompt. Once I paste that into an LLM, I could then copy it back, and it looks like this. And then there's the XML input. The alternate thing is, say I'm working here and I've got like the engineer prompt and I'm like typing up and I'm working through here and I'm like doing my high level thing. I can take the response, paste it back here, or just say like make the make the cube green blue instead of green. So I can do that and just type that, and then so we can run that and just I'll just ask O1 to do it. And so it should basically just go ahead and think through like what's the minimum change that I can just highlight. So it's going to go ahead and do it. So it just found like one line of code to change. Perfect. So we'll just do that. Paste that in. It just changed the one line of code,
Wow.
and then it's blue.
That's so
Um,
fast. Wow. 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 Wow.
yeah, so when you're, because yeah, a lot of the times, especially if you're waiting for these reasoners and you're having to
Yes.
rewrite the code every time in full, you're going to wait a while. And so like being able to just kind of replace the different parts of code that you need, like that's super helpful. And so like if you're just iterating here, like you can just say like, here's my change, oh, undo it, oh sorry, here's my change, oh, undo it, and come back, paste it in. Like that's just like a good way to just kind of work back and forth. If you're doing complex changes here, like, and especially you want to do like XML whole, you're like, okay, like rewrite all these files for me, like I want a clean start, and you can go ahead. So you just toggle that here as well. So it's like just two ways to get to the same thing.
Wow, that's super impressive as far as just kind of trying to use this thing, because this is a very powerful tool. There's a lot of different complexity going on here, and so the magic here is to be able to like get as much of the as stuff as possible. So how would you think about Like I think there's some common tasks people were asking about, like a PRD. So they
Yeah.
like, how would you go about doing something like that?
Okay. So a PRD, like, it's like a product requirements document for those who are not familiar with it. So basically, you want to come up with like, okay, well, what are the like list of features that I want to support here? And you would just type them up, and you can just type them up here. Like, say, I want like, a menu at the top. You want so like a menu at the top. You want, yeah, so you want a menu at the top. You want basically a button that resets the spheres, and a third sphere. Okay, so say like these are my like basic, like these are my requirements. So I can create like I can basically just have, so we can create a stored prompt here and say like PRD maker. And actually, you know what? Let's just have ChatGPT 4.0 make me prompt that creates a PRD from another prompt. So we'll just have ChatGPT 4.0 like write me a prompt. So
This is like
yeah,
the
I'm just
secret
gonna,
sauce that a lot of people don't realize is that these language
yeah,
models are really good at actually writing prompts for themselves
yeah, yeah,
or
exactly,
for other
exactly.
machines, if you know what I
Uh,
mean. Yeah.
so great. So we've got the PRD prompt. PRD maker. Perfect. So we've got that. So we've got PRD maker selected. So when you've got your prompts here, we can just toggle that on. Great. So I've got this. It's got like the context here. It's got PRD maker. Great. So let's give that to O1 and see what happens. So O1 is what you want for PRDs because it's going to be a lot more thorough. It's going to look through. We can use O1 Pro as well. And actually,
Oh,
we can, as we're doing that, we can run the experiments. So as I was mentioning earlier, I like to run experiments. I like to try different models and see what they output. Sometimes I run O1 and I'm like, maybe I'm happy with the output and I don't need to wait all the time for O1 Pro. That's just probably why Sam is saying they're losing money on the $200 subscriptions because of people like me who's running experiments all the time.
heck yeah.
Um,
Get my money's worth.
so yeah,
I mean,
so okay, so what did it do? So it took my small prompt, and it really flushed it out. So here's the showcase. It's telling you okay, it's coming up with target audience. It's coming up with like all kinds of extra stuff that like maybe you don't need. So you can kind of tweak this PRD prompt if you want to like have it do less stuff. It's giving technical requirements, user stories. Great, it's going through all this stuff. Okay, great. So I can take this, and we're gonna go back ahead. And so we made a PRD. Now we can have it architect that, and then so if you really want to take your time, you can just go ahead and run through the loop. So before you have it write a single line of code, you're having it flush out all the details. Ideally, you're reading what it's writing, and you're making sure that it actually agrees. And if not, you can kind of go back and say like, hey, like I don't care about this one thing. But see, it came up with weeks and milestones, which maybe this is like very unnecessary for
that's
like
funny.
when you're working on tasks,
Right.
but
You know,
it's
I
just
should do
funny.
some on QA engineering. I think that could be super helpful. Just I
Yeah.
think because I think these models can act more human-like, and you can have them focus
Yeah.
more on like pain points of users, right? So like
Mhm.
they can simulate your grandma who just kind of doesn't know where to tap or whatever, or just kind of gets confused, which is kind of cool. And you kind of need that because as an engineer, when you're thinking, you're obviously very following very logical steps, but it's not actually how most of the
Mhm.
world uses these devices. so
For sure,
so
for
it'd be
sure.
really interesting. Huh. This is really cool.
Yeah. So you can see like it took my requirements and it created architectural decisions from all of them. And this is where I find like you get a lot of value out of like having the AI think through like what it is that you want it to do rather than having like everything kind of just written code from scratch. Because if you just say like okay, like when we went for our original prompt, like what was it? It was like menu at the top. Like we can maybe see like let's just run that experiment, see like how does it compare from like what we did earlier into this. So like now it's going to run the architect against just my simple instructions, and you could probably see that it's probably going to be like less thorough. But oftentimes like this is enough. Like architect plus these little things, this is enough to just like get some good results. So it's going through, it's writing potential impacts, just having these like role prompts. It just goes a long way, and we can just see like okay, if I run the engineer prompt with O1, like how does that look? and it's just going to go ahead and think straight to the code without the actual key things. And there's probably going to be a number of like caveats that like maybe the LLM didn't think through. So it just timed out. That's an annoying thing with that. Um,
So I
let's see,
want
now
to
it's just
ask
ready.
you, as a fellow engineer,
Mhm.
because you may run into a new open source library that somebody just released or published, and so
Mhm.
as a senior, engineer that you've been, staff level now, as far as research and stuff, and you write a lot of code. How do you approach looking at a new library? Like, what are some of the steps
Mhm.
that you start going through that maybe you don't even think about anymore? It's like asking
Yeah.
Steph Curry how he starts his basketball shot. It's like he has to
Yeah.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
about it. He's like, I don't even think anymore. But I feel like that could be very helpful for people watching because maybe they can try to mimic some of these techniques or
Yeah.
leverage that with the language models to help them, think through because there's a lot of complexity sometimes in the code. Even though it's sort of simplified, a lot of the times, they like what are some of the things that people should be thinking of, as far as like code or how they should even just be approaching, try to implement like an API spec because I think people are seeing, okay, here's the new API spec for generating images for an image model, and so people are like, okay, how do I read this API documentation? I don't even know how to put this in my code.
So I'm going to write this little prompt here. What are the key things you should research about this repo based on, well, we'll include the file tree and the package JSON. So we'll ask DeepSeek, like, what are some key things? Um, so basically it's writing out all of our requirements. So one thing that's like really useful is just like basically like trying to be efficient about like getting structured, figuring out like how things are organized. And then I like to use Perplexity a lot because it's like a good search tool to kind of get info about them. So this is not web access, so it just read the spec, it knows like what's in here. But we can go ahead and use Perplexity to kind of get more up to date information about any of these one things. So generally, if I have a question, like I just kind of like write like my spec, like what kind of tools I'm working with, and then kind of have Perplexity do some research for me to kind of get that. And often I'll paste the response of Perplexity back into Repo Prompt and kind of use that in my prompt. Um, there are other tools like LLM crawl, Firecrawl, that will use like LLMs to kind of crawl structures. There's other tools that I'm looking into to kind of eventually just like search a page and then pull out info and kind of include them. What's great with repo prompts is I can actually add like another folder here, and so I can go ahead like just add like another repo like this, and it'll add the second repo here, and I could access files from it if I want in my prompt. So I can go ahead and grab like here's the package JSON from that file or the README from that one, and so they're both kind of showing up here separately from the two files. So if I go into the utils here, so you got the utils, and then yeah, so those are showing up there. So we can get everything and kind of copy that and kind of go work with it. Um, so yeah, like a lot of the times it's just getting in your context. Either you can put them in text files, markdown files, like finding a way to kind of get the relevant like API context in, and then building prompts with them afterwards and going from there.
That's super useful. Yeah, because in this age, I feel like sometimes just giving it the documentation, it could be too much. And there's too many
Hmm.
either functions or you're not really know what you're supposed to do. A perfect
Hmm.
example for me is like I'm playing around with the Vercel AI SDK a lot. And there are only actually 4 functions, but the documentation is massive because there's like an
Yeah.
a UI component, there's a core component, there's all these other components to it, and you're like, okay, I just need to either generate text or generate objects. Am I streaming them or am I going to just display them? It's like that's the only 2 things. And
Yeah.
so everything else kind of goes off from that depending on your use cases. And so like for me, it took me a little while to figure that out. It wasn't really that obvious from all of that documentation, but it's just kind of this back and forth. But I feel like kind of like a little side quest right now. I feel like in 2025, I feel like it's really important to not let these models just completely, like you say, like code everything and you don't really know what's actually
Hmm.
happening in the code. But doing these
Yeah.
types of things where you can use these models' intelligence to grab pieces of documentation or to ask
Yeah.
it to help you organize the information so that you can understand what the code is doing. And
Yeah.
basically as an AI architect, as an engineer architect, you want to use that as your building blocks, right? So then you start to like, okay, if I'm going to build a house, I'm going to need some wood. Are you going to build that out of wood or bamboo, right? So it's like, those are choices you make, and then you start to learn about the differences. You're like, okay, bamboo can be brittle if I do this, and like this type of wood is really good, redwood for this. But then, so you start to then actually make conscious choices. And I think that's just part of the engineering. And I think there is also like this farce of people trying to move too fast without actually learning the engineering. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're going to learn a lot. Even experienced engineers, I've seen this a lot internally at big companies or a big company, where like some of these people have like, PhD level stuff. They've been working at the company for 20 years. And there's like this bug that just comes out of nowhere. And it just stuff happens if you have an open source closed source operating system for like 20, 30 years. It's like some unexpected timing is now revealed because the device is a lot faster than before. And there was a lot of assumptions made with code back then that still worked until like now. So it's like, how do you, like there's going to be new things in the environment that influence, decisions in the past, and finding those bugs can just be a pain in the butt. And
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
everything kind of comes down to, what you'll eventually start to come through is like debugging. And so this is part of that debugging process, is to understand what's happening in the code. You keep these models mentally in your head, or have it documented somewhere that you can reference back to, because you're not always going to have them loaded in your head unless you're using that often. So yeah.
So it's funny. Speaking of debugging, that's one thing that I found like O1 to be exceptionally helpful with. And I've solved like a large number of issues in Repo Prompt using O1 Pro. Um, debugging is an interesting task because like you have some models and some tools where they can go ahead, run check for errors, and see like, okay, like fix the errors as they come. But if you're using O1 Pro, like you want it to kind of really think through like the code, and then kind of try and find like the origin of the issue. This is not a prompt that's built in. It's one I'm still experimenting with. It's kind of interesting. Um, but like you can come up with your own, like this thing. Like people are like, oh, what prompt are you using for this? What prompt are you using? Like often like I just try prompts and see what happens, and sometimes I share them, and they're not like a crazy like rocket science thing. Like just have like some ideas that you have, and have O1 Pro kind of reframe them and put them in, or O1 just reframe your prompt into a nice concise form. So this is one of them I was experimenting. So when you're finding bugs, like one thing that you want the AI to do is like basically like find three suspects. Like, okay, you don't want to find all the suspects, because if you try and say like here, like what are all the suspects, like what are every single thing, like AI models right now, they suck at kind of being exhaustive. But if you give them three things to focus on, they're going to find three things. And then you can have it rate the how confident it is in that thing. So I have it. Okay, so it finds three suspects. It'll give them a confidence score, and then actionable next steps. Like, okay, well, say that you have each of these things as a problem. Like, what would you do about each of them? And then, if especially you're asking O1 Pro to kind of think through these things, you can have it go and run deep, and it'll give you kind of some like root cause analysis, and like basically like going through all of your thinking there. So this is one way to go about it. Often I find like even going simpler than this, like just saying like I have a user is experiencing this kind of issue. Um, like isolate like a key thing, just keep it simple, like don't write too much, and just have O1 Pro kind of go with less constraints. Sometimes it'll surprise you. So like these prompts, like each of them, they add constraints on the output, and sometimes that's good because you want to kind of like act it like a prism, focusing the model on a specific thing that you're thinking about. But often like just having the AI model kind of go off and like give less constraints, you kind of let it explore a bit. And that's why like I like the idea of just running parallel experiments as these reasoners kind of run off. Like you can try different things and see what the results are. And that's quite helpful too. But yeah, just going off doing that. And then the other thing that you want to do that I find is really fun with reasoners is you can say like, okay, so with that make um a surgical change to implement the above. Something like that, just little qualifiers like that, like having it be extremely surgical. Like what is like the minimum change needed to kind of execute on that idea? Like that's really helpful. Or like find the critical line of code causing this issue, something like that, just like having it like be very specific and like kind of going through. So like sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not. You have to experiment and try things. So I think the biggest thing, like if you're trying to think like a scientist using these models, it's like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to get the answer in one, or maybe I will, but maybe let's just try different variations of this prompt. And that's what I really like about RepoPrompts. Like it lets me easily run experiments. And I mentioned this briefly earlier, like working on this workspaces update that will help you kind of quickly bounce between repos. There's going to be presets for different like files that you want selected. So you can kind of set up like a preset, like this is my task with my prompt and everything, kind of go with that and hop between different ideas and just kind of bounce with things. And that's like a thing that you kind of have to start getting good at with reasoners. I think like one thing that's probably not going to change as the models improve is how long it takes to get an answer, because the longer you have it think, the better the answer. So even with more compute and even as the models improve, like you're still going to want them to think for longer. Like maybe in many cases you don't need to, and maybe there's going to be some ways to kind of gradually dispatch to a higher and higher end reasoner. Like I don't know, maybe that's like a product thing. Like if you start typing and like 013 or 03 mini will go off and be like, hey, like here's like an idea, but maybe it has some self-confidence scoring, and it'd be like, maybe we should dispatch this one to O1 Pro, that kind of thing. I don't know. That's just hypothetical right now. But you have to start getting good at waiting a while for your answer. And so that's why having multiple tasks in parallel is going to be very important.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I mean, we've covered a whole bunch of stuff, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface with these types of reasoner models. Like you said, the R1 just came out. You've been using O1 Pro a lot, and so Eric has been able to share, quite a bit of his techniques that he's currently using here with Repo Prompts. I learned here about like XML, and then giving us like either whole changes. I think another revealing thing I didn't realize is the fact that you can just turn a prompt and have it basically do tool use just within the prompt. I think that's kind of genius if you think about it. And so it's like, of course, that's the way they work. And maybe, of course, that's probably how the tool use maybe even works. So it's really revealing here. And so the other thing that, we learned is just about, context and feeding in the right files, just so that you don't really overburden it. But at the same time, you can use this maybe as a first step to also ask these different questions. So there's a lot of fluidity. Prompt engineering is not going to go away in the coming years. I feel like this is going to get even more important to direct this type of intelligence, because we as humans are still really trying to discover what this thing is as far as an AI type of thing. And that's why the Silicon Valley is and like all these other companies are spending a lot of money to hire engineers who work in this space. So if you're hearing people say, oh, prompt engineering is gone, don't focus on that, they're probably not as tied into like really using these models day to day like the way that we're using them, because we realize there's so much even more untapped intelligence. And so the more breakthroughs that happen, the more we need even more engineers to help us use them for various use cases, because we know that they can be leveraged. So, and I encourage you to start now if you haven't started yet, or if you're getting into it and it seems too confusing, just start diving in, even something simple like that. One of the techniques is just asking an AI model to give it instructions for itself to help improve this prompt. This is my goal. This is my outcome. I want this type of thing. Can you help me get a better result? And like Eric was saying, experiment. Definitely experiment as much as possible. Try different prompts, O1 versus O1 Pro. We saw the difference, right? Just one key ingredient from O1 to O1 Pro. O1 Pro, just boom, like it gets us the whole result. The same may also happen with R1 and so forth, and those types of things. So, Repo Prompt is such a great tool as far as being able to combine all these things, get different repos and put them together in one space to get that type of information that you need if you're going to implement something. So that's amazing, man. Wow.
Yeah, and just to cap on that, like one thing I find in my personal way of working with LLMs is like you want to be in control the whole time. Like I think like there's going to be a time when the AI models are going to be able to kind of go off and do a lot of things. Everyone's like really excited for agents, but like a lot of the people really excited for agents are venture capitalists. You see the big thing, like they want that future where like AI can displace humans. And I think that like AI can do a lot of things, but like it's not a human. It's a different thing. It's like a whole different beast. And you want the human to kind of be in the loop right now, guiding the AI, like reading what it's saying, kind of putting your critical thinking on there, using your world context. Like AIs, they have a limited context. Eventually they're going to be able to do more, but like even then, like they're not like a human brain. The way they think about context is not like a human does. We might think about a conversation we had with our manager or like with a friend, and you might come up with some inspiration from a movie that you thought of, or you might have some taste. You might like look at a thing and be like, I don't like that. It's ugly. So taste comes into it. And when you're reading code and you want to see what's happening, like you want to be able to like judge and see things. And that's like a core part of like why I built this app and how I built this. Like I don't want the AI to kind of do everything for me. I want to like be in control. Like, what does my prompt say? what is a part of it, like what lines of code am I editing, am I accepting this line of code or not. Like the AI can make all kinds of changes, but maybe not all of them are good. And often they make mistakes, and they're just like humans do. But like sometimes if you're just going too fast, it'll make mistakes and your code's going to break, and that's no fun. um, so yeah, keeping the humans involved, like keeping them engaged, like working with the machine to kind of come up with better outcomes, I think that's super important.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit off in terms of how agentic these can feel, and then like you say with agents come style, right? I mean, I think the perfect example are some of these large companies who have so many employees, but they can't really ship software, ship features and stuff,
Hmm.
and even prominent companies, right? I mean, like, just think about ChatGPT, right? Like that could have came out of Google DeepMind if they had the right product centered people that were just a small enough team to just say, this is what we're doing and we're just going to do it. And those, and like, so it kind of really goes to show, like you are as a human, can use these to leverage that type of intelligence. Definitely start playing around. If you're really interested in checking this stuff out, repoprompt.com is definitely the place to go follow. You can check out Eric's X handle. It's at PVNCHER. It's almost like puncher with a V, right?
Yeah, it's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
go follow Eric. Just all kinds of really good sauce released all the time. There's a Discord also in Repo Prompt, so there's other folks who are using that. You can go join the family there. There's some people who also asked about the prompts, so I think you could probably have some of that in your. If they don't have a Mac, they can still use the prompts either by like maybe have it posted in your Discord or something.
Hmm. Yeah, so some of them are there, but like like I encourage you, like these are prompts that are there, but like think about like just use the models to have them write prompts. Like that's what I encourage you to do. Like just like have a one write you a prompt that like is about architecting. Like ask yourself like, okay, well, if I was in that role, like what would I need? What do I want the AI to actually do? And so like yes, I can share prompts and do stuff, but like I really encourage you all to just put some critical thinking and using the AI to kind of craft your own prompts to help build better prompts together. And like that whole skill of like taking a step before you have it solve a problem, like okay, have it clarify the question, have it clarify the outcome that you want, and then go ahead and get the outcome. So like just taking a beat, that's like everything, all the whole difference in being able to really ship production ready things with AI.
Yeah, that's excellent. I feel like Eric, we can keep going down this whole rabbit hole. I know you have to go get back to your family and back to work and various things. So I really appreciate you taking this time out of your day to come just show us a little sneak preview of the things that you've been working on and giving us some of those insights for talking to these reasoning models. And for those who want to learn more, feel free to go check out repoprompt.com, join the Discord, go join the groups there and kind of learn more about it. If you have a Mac, this tool is available for you. If you have any other machine, feel free to sign up on the wait list. So when Eric go ahead and drop that. But yeah, just you've shared a ton of stuff here, and there's going to be like a lot of people. So I'm going to try to go through manually myself and maybe through some AI systems and try to see if we can do some timestamps. And if you find anything relevant and you're watching this, you're like, damn, that's really good. Just drop a comment on the timestamp. Like, I learned this at this timestamp. And not only is it helpful because you learned it, but someone else who comes to this video later on can go back into the comments and they'll see it. And so if I see those timestamps and I see a lot of people talking about that or a lot of people like it, then I'll definitely include it into the timestamps as well, because I feel like this video is really for you and it's for everyone in the community, because this AI stuff is moving incredibly fast. And I feel like as a community, we have these beautiful tools like YouTube for streaming and X for streaming, and these communities like on Discord to help share this knowledge for us, because we're all interested in this type of systems. It's doable. There's no gatekeeping here. We're just trying to share as much as possible and give back and share to one another. I come in peace and love, just like all my other friends, and I hope that you guys are all part of that as well. So, any last words you'd like to say, Eric?
Yeah, just get in touch. I am very responsive on the Discord. If you have any questions, you're using the app and you like it, or there's something missing, like I'm very responsive to feedback. And I'm happy to just chat about these things too. Like we don't have to only talk about Repo Prompt. Like it's a thing I've been working on a lot. But if you have questions, you're working in AI, you're working on whatever, you want some help with that, like I'm happy to share some thoughts too. So Yeah, I just get engaged and try these things, run experiments, see what happens, and share what's happening. Oh, I did this and it improved my output. Like that's great. I love hearing stuff like that. Like it's really helpful. So yeah,
That's
thanks a
cool.
lot.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone who's been watching the stream. We've got quite a number of people, like 600 people on the stream. We've got a bunch of people from X who joined in, also from YouTube. I definitely appreciate everyone. If you're liking what you're seeing, definitely feel free to subscribe. Available at RayFernando1337. Find me on YouTube. You could find me on X. Share this with a friend who you think could benefit from this. And together we'll grow and be connected to the AGI. No, I was just kidding.
Thanks for having me, Ray.
All right.
Appreciate your time again. It's always a good time having these chats with you.
Definitely. Thanks so much, y'all. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Peace.